Oh yeah, I can't believe we have made it to episode 7 of 7. But here we are at the end of our Echoes of Tyranny series, where we have dove deep into dystopian literature and, well, in many ways, I guess you could say, our own dystopian world that we are living in right now today. We've probably dissected, compared, contrasted Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's novel Brave New World with each other and with our own world for, I would suppose around 8 to 10 hours by now, by the end of this talk today. So let's just dive into it as we drive the final nail in the coffin to this series. So imagine you're walking through a dark forest at night. The trees around you, they're twisted and they're bent. Their branches are kind of reaching out like long fingers of some unforeseen force. Every so often you kind of catch a glimpse of light, but it's always just out of reach. That's kind of the world Orwell and Huxley created in 1984 in Brave New World. Two forests. One was built on fear, the other on comfort. But in both of them, you're lost, stumbling through a reality that's been designed to keep you from finding your way out. So far, we've been making our way through these dark woods as we've been working through this series. We've been following the trail that's left by two of the greatest novels of all time. And today we're not just going to find our way out. We're first going to stop on the edge of it. We're going to look back and we're going to ask, what in the world did all of this mean? What lessons did Orwell and Huxley leave us in the shadows? And why do these warnings seem even more urgent today? So grab your compass, grab your flashlight. It's time to unravel the endings, legacies, and enduring relevance of these prophetic stories. So first, let's just go right to the endings of these novels. We took ourselves right up to the edge of them in the last podcast. And so let's explore the finales of 1984 and Brave New World in greater depth. And this time we're going to look much more closely at key passages that cement the conclusion. So in 1984, Orwell doesn't just end the story with Winston's defeat. He gives us one of the most chilling representations of total control you could ever find in literature. After enduring relentless psychological, physical torture in the Ministry of Love, Winston finally reaches the point of complete surrender. The pivotal moment comes when O'Brien, Winston's torturer, breaks him down by forcing him to confront his deepest fear in the dreaded Room 101. For Winston, this fear is rats. I mean, it's a horrific fear. It goes back to his childhood, and this fear is just ingrained deeply in him. And at the edge of breaking, Winston finally betrays his lover, Julia, in a desperate plea to save himself. And it's so important to note, again here, he always promised himself in his mind that, sure, he's probably going to be broken by O'Brien and by the party, but he was never going to betray Julia. Well, at the end, here's a quote from the novel when finally Winston is threatened with, basically getting a throng of rats put inside of a cage that was fit over the top of his face. And Winston says this: "Do it to Julia, not me. Julia, I don't care what you do to her. Tear her face off. Strip her to the bones. Not me. Julia, not me." End quote. This is the moment when Winston's last shred of rebellion dies. Sure, he saves himself physically, but he loses everything that makes him human. His capacity for love, capacity for loyalty, and his capacity to have any type of defiance. He's betrayed himself. The final chapter just reveals the depth of his transformation. When Winston sees Julie again, finally, so Winston is broken, he's released back into the public, and he sees Julie again. Both are physically and emotionally just wrecked. Any trace of their once passionate affair, it's all gone. And you can see, and it's described behind them, just two broken souls who admit without bitterness that they have betrayed one another. In the last lines of the novel, Orwell delivers the devastating blow when he says this, quote, "He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother." This sentence encapsulates Orwell's darkest warning. The state can so thoroughly manipulate an individual that they not only submit to oppression, but they come to love it. Winston's internal resistance is annihilated. He becomes a true believer of the party and the state, illustrating Orwell's fear that the human spirit, it can be reshaped entirely by external forces. But on the other hand, we look at the ending of Brave New World, and it has a different but equally devastating kind of tragedy. Remember our hero John the Savage's fate? It's not the result of brute force, but of spiritual and psychological despair. Because after he escaped the suffocating control of the world state, where pleasure, stability, and comfort, they reign supreme, John attempts to reclaim his autonomy through self-imposed exile. He would rather be alone by himself than be part of this fake facade of people. He retreats to this abandoned lighthouse, and he tries to practice just physical and emotional purging. He's hoping to cleanse himself of the artificiality of the society that he just had grown to despise since he was brought there. And however, the relentless curiosity of the world state citizens turn him into a spectacle. Crowds gather to watch him whip himself in this desperate attempt to reject the hollow pleasures of the quote-unquote brave new world. He becomes a zoo animal. And in the end, John succumbs to the very forces that he wanted to escape from. He's unable to reconcile his desire for purity and truth with that inescapable superficiality of society around him. And to put it bluntly, he hangs himself. And the final image of the novel is brutal. Quote, "Slowly, very slowly, like two unhurried compass needles, the feet turn towards the right, north, northeast, east, southeast, south, south, southwest," then paused, and after a few seconds, turned as unhurriedly back towards the left, south, southwest, south, southeast, east. End quote. Huxley just leaves us with a haunting image of John's lifeless body hanging, rotating slowly like a symbol of his failed rebellion against a world that numbs, distracts, and consumes without mercy. In this final moment, Huxley suggests that even the fiercest individual spirit can be crushed. Not even through direct oppression, but by an unyielding tide of very shallow pleasures and loss of meaning. Both of these novels end in defeat, but in the nature of that defeat is crucial. Orwell's world was one of violent coercion, where the state obliterated the mind through fear and control. Huxley's dystopia is even more insidious. It's a society where control is exerted not through punishment, but through the seduction of pleasure and convenience, luring even the most resistant into submission. And when you look at it, both characters in the end, nobody even batted an eyelash at them. Although the ends of both were horribly tragic, the truth is nobody else in society cared at all. These novels didn't just stay on the shelf. When we think of the legacy of 1984 and Brave New World, these two novels, they've woven themselves into the very fabric of our culture, and it shaped how we think about power, freedom, society after you read these things. And you might be thinking, oh, that's a little bit too much there. That can't be true. But hear me out just for a few minutes here as I'll bring up 5 different ways that these novels hit the nail on the head on things going on in our society right now. The first one, just language in general, the language of control. Orwell gave us phrases like Big Brother, doublethink, thought crime, concepts that have slipped seamlessly into our everyday vocabulary. Whenever we talk about surveillance or censorship, we're living in Orwell's world. Let's just go with things like the Ministry of Truth, where history is altered, or the quote-unquote Ministry of Love, where political dissidents are tortured and often even killed. And let's contrast that against our modern political language, where when we look after 9/11, the Patriot Act, sounds so patriotic. You must be a real lover of America to believe the Patriot Act. If you don't, how horrible must you be? And this was meant to save us from terrorism, by the way, but it basically robbed us very quietly of all of our personal freedoms and gave the ability to spy to the CIA, the NSA, at levels that are cringeworthy at the minimum. Or if you don't like that one, how about the Inflation Reduction Act, which was enacted basically to slow our inflation down, but it actually led to inflation just spiraling out of control as trillions of dollars were handed out all across the economy, from people to companies all over the place. The gaslighting and labeling of anyone who doesn't agree with an opinion as being either a fascist, a communist, a sexist, a racist, a misogynist, or whatever label fits at that time, depending on whatever side of the argument you might be in. Or my favorite, we need to save democracy by limiting free speech online. For what? To protect us from disinformation, of course. But disinformation from who? And who gets to label something as disinformation? And why should I trust the labeler of that? I mean, the language of control is getting stronger and stronger every day by governments and even our multinational corporations. Another one, the rise of the nanny state. Huxley's vision of a government that keeps its population docile through pleasure, material things, distraction, never been more relevant than our world today. From our endless streaming services to hyper-targeted consumerism, we're living in a time where it's easier to drown in convenience than confront difficult truths. Huxley's warning about the dangers of a society obsessed with comfort has become a cautionary tale about our own addiction to technology and entertainment. Another one, The Surveillance State. Both novels predicted the rise of modern surveillance, all in different ways, of course. Orwell's Oceania is a place where you're always watched by the state, a reality mirrored in today's existence of government surveillance programs. Huxley, on the other hand, visioned a society where people willingly just gave up their privacy in exchange for comfort, which sounds eerily similar to the way we trade personal data for quote unquote free accounts. I'm talking to you, Facebook and X and Instagram, all of you. Every single time that you exchange for, oh, it's a free account, nothing is free, and that's not free. Your data is being tracked. Whether it's government eyes or corporate algorithms, our privacy is shrinking day by day. Sometimes, like the Patriot Act, it's taken away from us by the government in the guise of protecting the nation. Other times, it's just for mere convenience. And it's free. Isn't free wonderful? The truth is, the surveillance state is real, and probably more than even Orwell or Huxley could have imagined. The war on truth, Orwell's concept of doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time, has crept into our political discourse at despicable levels, especially when it comes to the manipulation of truth. The erosion of objective facts, the rise of quote-unquote alternative facts, and the relentless spin of information are straight out of 1984, as facts are just slippery narratives easily rewritten. The gaslighting is a chilling reality of how powerful these machines can be in manipulating truth. And then the fifth thing, just the question of free will. Both of these novels, they force us to grapple with the question of freedom. What does it mean to be truly free? Is freedom the ability to make choices? Or are those choices themselves actually an illusion when we're shaped by a system designed to control you and I from the outset? Brave New World and 1984 remind us that it's not just about external freedoms, but internal ones. Freedom to think, to feel, and act without invisible chains. So, really, where does this leave us? In a place where these books aren't just literature, or you could almost use them as a guide, a tool for survival. And if you haven't read 1984 Brave New World, now is the time to do it. Revisit these works. I know every week I talk about it, but you should read these novels. Not just to admire their craft because they're fun and interesting stories to read, but to arm yourself against the very real threats they subscribe. You see, when governments overstep, when corporations silence dissent through algorithms, when truth becomes murky, these books, they can help us see clearly, at least at the attempts at manipulation. They remind us to question, to resist complacency, and to safeguard our ability to think freely. If we don't, the dystopias of Orwell and Huxley won't remain fiction. They'll become more and more our children's reality. Reading these novels isn't an exercise in nostalgia. It's an act of rebellion. It's about reclaiming our agency in a world that's trying to take it away. And do not be mistaken, large governments, large corporations, those with power and money and influence want to take these things away, piece by piece, distraction by distraction, regulation by regulation, because as citizens, nobody's going to save us or help us but you and I. It's our collective duty to stay vigilant. We need to speak out and we need to push back. If we don't, we risk sleepwalking into a future where the worst nightmares of these authors become the waking world for the next generation. As I was getting ready to record the final episode that I'm talking to you right now with, I ran across this quote before I did it, and I decided on the fly that I wanted to close this series on a singular idea. I know the novel's more complex and nuanced, but I think we've beat it and covered it from pretty much every angle that I can think of covering it. I'm sure there's more, but we pretty much hit all the main concepts, ideas across both of those novels. And the quote that I ran across was from C.S. Lewis, and he once said this, quote, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under the robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated, but those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." End quote. I read that as I was getting ready to do this podcast. I'm like, dang, that okay. I gotta focus on this. So let's dive into this quote a little more. So to close out this series, let's draw some parallels here. Not just Orwell's 84 and Brave New World as we've been doing, but that kind of quote unquote benevolent oppression that shows up in our world today. To me, it's the most infuriating type of oppression that we get. When a government tells me they're going to do something for me because they love me and care about me, it just infuriates me. So let's break this down a little further. Orwell, 1984. He wasn't just giving us that brutal totalitarian regime to be scared of. He was holding up a mirror to the kind of tyranny that thrives under the guise of doing what's necessary. You remember Big Brother didn't just simply oppress for the sake of oppression. No. It was the party's vision of a better world. Every act of surveillance and every moment of thought policing was wrapped up in this language of protection, of saving people from themselves. The thought police aren't out to get you because you're a terrible person. They're there to help you. They're there so that you stay on the straight and narrow, to ensure that you never slip up, according, of course, to their moral compass. In 1984, the tyranny is sincerely exercised for the good of its victims. That's what O'Brien said. It's a tyranny that justifies its torture through its own moral virtue. O'Brien, Winston's primary torturer, he doesn't even see himself as evil. He's there to correct Winston, to realign him with the truth that the party sees. It's the most dangerous kind of oppression, and the kind of oppression that never ceases. Because when the oppressors believe they're righteous, and you, how shall I say it kindly, are inferior, you're worthless. You're just not smart enough to understand. You're just a mere peasant or a cog in the machine. You're a useful idiot, and me too. Just like Lewis says, those type of people, out for your quote-unquote good, they'll torment you without end, because in their own eyes, they're helping. They are your moral busybodies with the same blind conscience Orwell so carefully laid out. Same thing, let's look at Brave New World. It was a different take, as we know, on tyranny, one that hits closer to home when we think about the comforts of our modern life in the United States or in the West. This is the tyranny of happiness, of comfort, of numb content. In Huxley's dystopia, people aren't terrorized by fear or brutalized into submission. They're sedated. They're given a drug keeps them docile, keeps them happy, keeps them safe. That word safety again. But here's the trick. Once again, it's all done in the name of people's good. The world state in Brave New World doesn't look like the terror machine of 1984. Looks like the ultimate nanny state where every pleasure catered to, every worry is erased. But that's the point. This too is a tyranny, sincerely exercised for the quote-unquote good of its victims. They've taken away the ability to think critically, to suffer, to grow. They've made adult humans into children, mere babies to be fed and cared for. For what is the care? How do they care for them? Give them drugs, give them things, give them sex, superficial things, so that nobody ever gets too mature and basically stays intellectually like adult babies. Lewis's omnipotent moral busybodies, in this case, are the architects of the world state who've decided that true freedom, the freedom to think, to fail, to experience pain, oh, that's too dangerous. That's too hard. That our poor little minds should just be sedated and programmed to walk like zombies in through this easy life. It'll be better for everyone this way. So they've locked the people into this permanent bubble of soft, comforting oppression. See, Huxley's vision, like C.S. Lewis's, shows how oppressive a system can be when its goal isn't control for control's sake. That can end at some point. But control for your well-being, that gives them the moral high ground. And I don't mean to sound tinfoil hattish, but I now cringe when I hear our government say they're doing something for our safety, for our health, as almost invariably the only ones who lose something or are forced to do something is, well, you and I and the average person. Now let's bring this thing back to today, because we're not just talking about the novels, we're talking about patterns. Look around you and you'll see the same kind of soft tyranny creeping into the modern world. It's not jackboots from the 19th century, wiretaps. It's algorithms, safety regulation. Sure, starts with good intentions, right? But good intentions have a funny way of snowballing out of control. Once we give, in quotes, give power on something, anything to the government, you can almost certainly bet it will never, ever be given back to you. And it certainly isn't just the government. Think about tech giants, how they curate your experience, how social media feeds are filtered for your quote unquote mental health, how algorithms decide what you should see to quote unquote protect you from misinformation. It's sold as protecting you, as curating your experience, so you don't have to. Keep it easy. But what happens when the moral busybodies behind the screen start deciding what's good for you? In a bigger sense, they aren't just stopping to ask you. Just like Lewis's tyrants, their conscience is clear. They believe that they're on the side of virtue. These governments, these big tech companies, any of these huge multinational corporations. But because of that, they torment you without any end. Because they think they're doing it in their moral high ground. In their own obscene arrogance, they believe that. The choices are taken from us piece by piece, all in the name of our own good, for the good of the country. It's the digital soma, the digital drug of the Brave New World, and the thought policing of 1984 all rolled up into one. And that's the danger today. Whether it's governments mandating more surveillance, mandating drugs to keep you safe, corporations controlling information to protect you from harm. It's always the same justification. They do it for your good. And that's why it's so hard to fight back. And that's why you got to have a mental capacity to go deeper and think harder than just accepting that superficiality. I think finally large chunks of the population are waking up to this. No one argues against safety or protection on the surface. But if we're not careful underneath, as Lewis warned us, that's where true oppression festers. It's subtle, it's well-meaning, but it is relentless. So as we close out, here's a thought I want to leave you with. Beware the tyranny of good intentions. Orwell and Huxley saw it coming. C.S. Lewis spelled it out. The most dangerous power is the one that truly believes it's helping you, because it doesn't ever stop. It will go for complete control. It never rests. And if we don't pay attention, that kind of tyranny will shape our world into something not too different from those dystopian nightmares we've been reading about and we've been warned about. So with that, stay alert, stay skeptical, and most of all, fight to keep your intellectual freedom, even from those who claim they want to, quote unquote, save you.